No, I've been around the sun a few times. On Earth, we make that annual trip once per year, and I guess this is my 74th. I passed my 73rd time. And watch out, son, I'm coming for my 74th. We thought, I have a bunch of images that I want to share with you. And we thought that the images were lost yesterday. So Sonia came over yesterday and said, Dad, we got to do the images again because something happened to my computer. I said, oh no. But they worked. I mean, we got it together. And I said, well, Sonia, I saw them on Facebook, and I see you on Facebook all the time.
I told him I'm unfollowing him.
That's what she told me. And you know, I dreamt about it last night. I dreamt that she deleted me. There should be a law, like Declaration of Independence. No, there should be a religious law. Thou shalt not delete your father. But no, I have a long history of both working and entrepreneurship. I started working when I was about 12 or 13. How many of you are from Homewood or from Pittsburgh? A few of you? From Homewood. My sister. I worked on Homewood Avenue when I was 12, 13, and 14. We had stores like B. Davis Department Store, Herman's Men's Store. Where else did I work? Penhurst Fruit Market. Homewood Avenue was like current-day Lawrenceville. So you could always get a job, and I worked there. One year when I was 18, I had 3 1040s and didn't make more than $4,000. Guess what minimum wage was? 85 cents per hour.
Wow.
Can you believe that? I thought I was doing good when it was $1.25 an hour. But I was always an entrepreneur. I have one quickie joke that I want to tell you. It's not a joke. It was quite serious when it happened. I've always been a very inquisitive person, creative. And some of you, do you remember the radios that were about this big? Do you remember those? Well, we had one in our hall that my uncle bought upstairs and put it in my brother's room, me and my brother's room. And the dial would light up, but it wouldn't do anything. So my uncle said, Johnny, don't you mess with that. Because I always mess with stuff. At one point, I was bombing the other block of Ottawa Street by cutting off match heads, putting it in a ink pen shell with one sticking out, tying two of them together and lighting it. Pow! Cool, huh? Anyway, said, Johnny, don't mess with that. Well, Johnny messed with it. And I was wondering why the dial would light up, but you would get no sound. So I turned it around. And when I did that, I could see that the speaker was laying on the floor. And one of the wires was missing off of the speaker. So I said, okay, let me connect this wire and see what happens. I did, and it started talking. I said, that's good, but it sounded real tinny. I said, why is it sounding so tinny? So I said, well, I'll put it back up on the baffle board, the front of the radio, and just leave it alone. And when I did that, it sounded 20 times better. And I couldn't figure out why. Why in the world does it sound better when I put it on the baffle board? So, here's the funny part. It's not funny. There was an extension cord and the cord for the radio in the back, because when it was in our hall, it was hooked up. We only had plugs on either side of the room back then on Ottawa Street. I said, well, let me use this extension cord to get some additional wire, and then I can move the speaker out of the box and see if I put it in the quarter and maybe it will sound better. It did not. But I didn't learn that until after I decided that, well, we need to move the speaker, so I'll just cut some of this extension cord off, and I can take both ends and splice them and put them together, no problem. So I had a pair of scissors, which was pretty much the extent of my toolkit. And I started to cut the extension cord and got knocked almost off of my feet. I didn't realize the extension cord was plugged up. Have you ever seen the commercials where somebody sticks their finger in a light socket and they get stars and everything else? Oh boy, that's what happened to me. But I left the room and went outside and played like I didn't know anything. I think I blew a fuse though. How many of you are entrepreneurs? All right. When I see entrepreneurs, I usually see a couple of things. Number one, if you're like me, you are creative. And on the right side of my hat, I have creativity. On the left side, innovation. In the front, you have truth. And that's before profit that's in the back. You have to have truth about what you are doing and know everything about what you are doing. What do I mean by that? For an example, if you're a surgeon and you're operating on, let's say, an appendix, they call that the proximal site. The appendix would be the proximal site. However, a good surgeon will tell you that I'm concerned about the distal area. So there's a proximal area and a distal area. And you need to be aware of that. So if you're an entrepreneur, you need to know everything about your product. Everything. And challenge yourself so that you can make certain that your product will live up to expectations indeed. So, I want to, we can't use a pointer, but I'm going to go through the slides. I understand we're going to save some time for questions and answers. And this will give us an opportunity to go through Black history also. If you're a black in Pittsburgh, it has always been difficult, and most recently proved difficult because of the report released last week that it's harder for blacks in Pittsburgh than anywhere else in the country. Can you believe that? I think it was third. That difficult for blacks in Pittsburgh. But you couldn't tell me that. That's why I became first black to work at Harbison and Walker Refractories. They had a job posting for, I think it was vice president or assistant vice president. And I thought I could do it. I went down and applied, and they put me in the mailroom. But I was the first black to work there after 100 years. That was in 1965. Civil War was over in 1865. It took 100 years to hire a black man in Gateway Center, downtown Pittsburgh. So a lot of blacks, in order to make it, you would go into business for yourself. And on this map of 1795, there's a gentleman, and you can't read his name, but he's at your far left. His name is Charles Richards, and he owned a bakery, and he owned real estate. He was just a tremendously gifted entrepreneur. So when I talk about having creativity and innovation and truth and profit, if you're a black man, put Superman on your chest. You need to be. And certainly he was, he and his son. But even before him, you might not know these names, but John Peck. John Peck's Oyster House was in Market Square, downtown Pittsburgh, near where the current Oyster House is. Do you know where the current Oyster House is? Mm-hmm. John Peck had an oyster house there first. A fellow by the name of John Vachon. He had a bathhouse on 4th Avenue, right around the corner from Market Square. And a fellow, you might know this name, Martin Delaney. No? He had the Mystery newspaper. He was a gifted physician. And he was a Pan-African guy. Anyway, it's a whole story about Martin Delaney. There is a historical marker for him, which is on 4th Avenue. That's where the office was for his mystery newspaper. You might want to take a look at it. But we had entrepreneurs back then. As a matter of fact, there were more entrepreneurs in the mid-1800s than there are right now. How many entrepreneurs are in Market Square right now? Raise your hand. You won't see any. Why? Because you haven't opened up your store yet. I'm hoping somebody will. We did have one. It was called Sincerely Yours. It was a card shop. Do you know, sir? And that was maybe 10 years ago. Yes. And somehow it didn't last too long. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we had Walt Harper's Attic at one point in Market Square. Walt Harper's Attic. None now. They say it's so difficult. And I know why. We all know why. But sometimes we don't like to hear the truth. But I'm going to tell you the truth today. I only have a half hour left. My goodness. Okay, Sonia, what's our next slide? Oh, this is how I started. They're kind of blurry. But here's what happened. I graduated from high school in 1964, January of 64. They took the silver out of our coinage in 1965. And I was alerted to that because I used to go to the corner store all the time for my uncles, my grandmother, and my mother. I said, these coins don't feel right. These are silver coins, and you know what? Not only the silver that's in the coin, but they have numismatic value. Numismatic value is a value made up because of the date and the quantity, et cetera, et cetera. I would find all kinds of money free. It was the start of my entrepreneurship. I would go to the store, and I worked at Penhurst Fruit Market and B. Davis. At Penhurst Fruit Market, I was a cashier. I used to get the change all the time. I made so much money, it was unbelievable. Part of that money helped me to buy my first house. Isn't that amazing? And guess what? Even right now today, if you look at your change within 2 months, I guarantee you that you will find a silver dime or a silver quarter. I found one a month ago, 1938. I put it in a jar. I found about 4 or 5 this year. You still see them because people don't know. And if you have a dime, guess what? Take it to the store, it's worth $1.20 or $2 or depending on the date, $5. And people don't know. You should look. So that's how I got started with silver coins. And as a consequence, I had time, because it was so easy, to investigate other things. And here's what happened. Remember I told you about the speaker. It didn't sound good unless it was attached to the baffle. Well, ultimately, I found that it didn't make any difference. No matter where you put the speaker in the room, if it wasn't attached to the baffle, it didn't sound right. I bought a new car. Not a new car. It was a 56 Pontiac that I bought in 1964. Anytime you hit the brakes, it would make an automatic right-hand turn. It's a wonder I'm still living. I'm an entrepreneur. Risk management. I managed it. I didn't like the music, so I bought 2 new speakers. And this cemented the need to investigate. I bought the speakers and I put them on the back, not the dashboard, but the back shelf where the back window is. And they sounded terrible. So I looked, I said, okay, I'm going to put these inside of the trunk. I didn't have a hacksaw then, so I couldn't cut. There was a metal bar running across this 56 Pontiac. I couldn't do it. So I just lived with tinny sounds. Now here's what I did. I made up in my own mind that I was going to investigate this and see what was up. Now when I show you the next slide, don't do it yet, Sonia.
Okay.
I took 2 years. In those 2 years, I became an acoustical engineer. I investigated intermodulation distortion, harmonic distortion, Doppler distortion, frequency response. Who hears this? Who hears that? Human beings can hear from 30 hertz to 20,000 hertz. 8 ohm impedance parallel with another 8 ohm impedance makes 4 ohms. I knew everything. And you know what I did? I said, I'm going to build a speaker. I was in the Westinghouse High School band. And every time they recorded Westinghouse High School band, you couldn't hardly hear the bass drum. And it sounded like the band was playing behind those curtains. It wasn't clear. It was muddy. I said, that's not right. All this 2 years, I investigated, and I came up with a physics plan to have the best speaker on the market. Do you think I did it? Show the slides, Sonia. I built that in the basement at 7038 Hermitage Street. Can I get an applause? I was not a carpenter. If you look at the intricate nature of that cabinet, it's called a pressure line. Because the problem the speakers have is that one speaker, which is held by its surround, when it moves in and out, there's nothing to control it but the surround. Well, if you use two in a tubular aspect, the pressure from one controls the movement of the other. And I called it the pressure line, 3210, because it would go flat to 32 hertz with two 10-inch cones. Guess when that picture was taken? 2 weeks ago. Guess when they were built? 1969. Thank you. Is that cool or not? Talk about being an entrepreneur. I was never a carpenter. I know you're going to ask me, well, what are you doing here now? What's up? Well, my son will tell you. John Jr., he's making speakers now. Hey, John. All right. I was importing speakers from Naraka, or from a dealer that imported from Naraka. They changed the speaker on me and would not change it back unless I bought 100. Number two, this cabinet that I built in the basement, which is, how big was the basement on Hermitage? 8 by 10 by not even 6 feet. I can't believe I built it. I couldn't do it today. I took this to a cabinet maker in Sharpsburg. I said, let me know what it would cost to make these. I'll be giving you about 10 per week. I would need about 10 per week. He came back with a price in the thousands. Because this enclosure has another enclosure inside of it that's built like a V, connected to a center board. It's very complex. I would love for you to see it. And one day I'll show you, if you're really interested, and you pay me. Profit. So anyway, that's my speaker. I played it. My kids grew up listening to music. They're designed for you to hear music at row F. Know what I mean? In the concert hall, row F. The dispersion, why it's angled at 45 degrees, is to hit the ceiling, come down, et cetera, reflections. Row F. And when you record a high school band, you would not believe the bass. It sounds just like a bass drum. Jay, how's the sound? JJ grew up with these. So, anyway, that's my loudspeaker. Thank you for the applause. That was one of the great ones. I appreciate it. But that's an entrepreneur, risk. But you know what? I didn't look at everything involved. I was dependent upon a speaker manufacturer. I was dependent upon a carpenter. And I didn't know it was going to be totally out of my reach. But I kept the speakers, and I sold two to a lady in Maryland, her and her husband. They never called me, so I'm sure the warranty worked. And every speaker has its own individual information on the back of the cabinet with my signature. I was that proud of them. The resonance frequency and all this kind of stuff is just amazing. I wish you could hear it. Okay, but you know I collect documents. I know African American history. And that's what I focused on after 1969, 1970. I had many promotions at Harvest and Walkery factories. I started at Mellon Bank, had 4 promotions, and started traveling on the road for Mellon Bank, the first black to represent Mellon Bank on the road. And I covered 3 states. And I ended up going to antique shops. And I was finding all kinds of good stuff. Like Thomas, who knows Thomas Mellon? T. Mellon and Sons. They started at Mellon Bank. I find documents from them. Nagley Avenue, I had documents from the Nagleys. John Nagley, yeah. Aiken Avenue, original documents of the Aikens. I sold Carnegie. I sold Carnegie for $1,500, his autographed letter. But I found all that stuff at antique shops, and I was buying from around the world, really. Okay, Sonia, let's do the next slide. What do we have up there next? Oh, brother. Slavery. All of my ancestors, those leg irons are on the table, all of my ancestors were from enslavement. And that had such a large impact on the populace. Why doesn't it affect me? Because I know what's happening, and I can go all the way back, as you can see, for about 2 or 3 million years. Not only do I discuss DNA. Have you heard of DNA? Right? Deoxyribonucleic acid. I went into mitochondrial DNA, which is only passed down from the mother. Know what I mean? So if you'd study mitochondrial DNA, any woman in this room, your DNA, your mitochondrial DNA is exactly like your mother's. And hers is just like her mother's, all the way back to the beginning of time except for mutations. So you can tell exactly where you come from. And it's amazing that if you're an African, you can go back to the beginning of Homo sapien sapien time. Now, we're here because of that enslavement vessel. Makes me sad. Okay, Sonia, let's do another slide. Oh, we go back before this guy. This is KNM ER 1470. That's his code name. They find so many skeletons in Africa that they call Australopithecus or Homo erectus or Neanderthal, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. This one they called Homo erectus. However, with my experimentation, I put this skull in a side plane, directly in a side plane with the Sphinx, better called Heremicat, but we know it as the Sphinx. The maxilla, the front of the face, is perfectly matched. The orbital ridge, the part above the eyes, perfect. We were biped, and this is 1.8 million years old. We were biped. Look it up. You can Google it. So that's amazing. Okay, babe. Okay, this is a map. You won't be able to see this. This is all of the slave ports, including those from Sweden and Denmark. And I started to bring it. I should have. The ones that I have don't have as much detail. But I bought this to show you how names change. If you notice at the bottom, you might be able to pick it out, and you will be able to see it on those maps. But it says the Ethiopian Sea, right off of the Ghana coast. It was called the Ethiopian Sea before it was called the Atlantic Ocean. Names are dependent upon who makes the map and who's in power. For an example, Africa, we call it now, it was never the name for Africa. Africans never called themselves Africans. If they were enslaved, they would say, I am Mandingo, or I am Ibu, I am Yoruba. They would never say, I'm African. Where did Africa come from? Well, it's hard to tell, but at the very tip of Africa, the Carthaginians, who were the Italians, really, or the Phoenicians, or the Romans, same people. Italians, Romans, Carthaginians, Phoenicians. They had a colony at the very tip of Africa, Namibia, called Tunis. We call it Tunis now, but they called it Africa. So when the enslavement process began, they started calling the entire continent Africa. But I won't even tell you what the oldest name is. Well, I will. Akibula. They would say themselves.
Say it again.
Akibula.
Please spell it.
ALKEBULAN. You can Google it. See, you can Google anything now. Akibulan. Isn't that amazing? Okay, next slide. That's 1732. Okay, they blame Africa now for all the pillage and all that kind of stuff, but it started with the Europeans. These are actual pictures. Hippo hunt, 1880. Look at all those tusks, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide. This is how they taught Africans about their culture, about European culture. And that's how we lost some of our culture. Let me tell you what a great, not great, I'll tell you what a guy said. In 1498, Vasco da Gama, he encircled the continent, what we call a continent now of Africa, for a tea and trading mission. He went back in 1502 with a punitive mission. Why did he give a punitive mission? He wanted control. And he gained control. In current day, this would be on the east coast of Africa. Current day Kenya and Tanzania. Here's what he said. I have conquered the coast. With that, I have conquered their land. Without their land, they have no history. And without their history, they will have no future. Was he right? But I fight it all the time. I don't want my history erased. And that's why I do what I do. So all these pictures and other documents I do because I want to be able to prove what I say. Next picture, baby. Okay, this is just more teaching how things happen. There was a guy in Central Africa. Have you ever heard of Leopold II? King Leopold II of Belgium. He killed over 12 million Africans in the Congo. And while we're talking about that, we have documentation that indicates the population of both where he's from and the Congo. In the Congo, they had 35 million people in 1800. Guess how many people were in Portugal? 1,500,000. But why do we call Portugal a nation and called the Congo a tribe. Do you understand what I mean? That's just the way why do we call it a jungle instead of a rainforest? See how we do? Oh, it's so deep. Okay, next slide. Oh, this is a good one. George Washington. Who was the first president of this country? Who? Okay, everybody said, well, he was. After the ratification of the Constitution. Now, when was the country founded? What year? 1776, right? George Washington wasn't elected president until 1789. So who ran the country? There's something, and they don't teach you this, and I'm so sorry. It's called the Continental Congress. They elected a new president every year. They ran the country up to the time of the ratification of the Constitution, which was in 1788, and elected George Washington in 1789. This is the document where he was given permission. What's his name? Master Benson, a ship called Charlotte, trading rum, wine, beef, pork, tea, and tobacco en route to Africa. It doesn't state that they were picking up enslaved Africans, but you can make that presumption. Or any other. Anyway, he was trading. We know that because we have the document. He was trading for something, and it's all there and written. Unfortunately, I only owned that document for about 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks. I purchased it. Some of the documents that I purchased, guys, I don't know how I did it. But there was a fellow, and I can mention his name. Was a business in downtown Pittsburgh called the Coin Exchange. Anybody know it? Well, the owner was Charles Littman.
Was it in the Market District?
No, 6th Avenue. The owner was Charles Littman. Pardon me?
Clark Building?
No. 6th Avenue. How are you? Good. If I found a document on auction, no matter where it was, if I went to Mr. Littman, said, I need this, I want to have it, he put the money up. And I could pay him back in 3 months, 6 months, or a year. So I could buy things that normally I couldn't afford. And I did that with so many documents. Okay, honey, next one. So we know George did have some contact with Africa. This is the result of the 15th Amendment. That was supposed to end things. Things were supposed to end in 1865 with the ending of slavery, the 13th Amendment. Then the 14th Amendment made all Africans citizens, and the 15th Amendment gave all Africans the right to vote, or African men the right to vote. Could white women vote? Nope. Not until 1920, right? You don't know. 1920. 19th Amendment passed in 1920, allowed white women and black women to vote. Before that, you couldn't vote. Okay, next one. Oh, this is the first gold coin I ever bought. 1978, I was buying the silver coins, as you know. But I was starting now to get into gold-proof coins. And so much of Africa was gaining their independence from colonial powers. Britain, Germany, France. And they were minting coins to celebrate their independence. And this is a coin for the 10th anniversary of their independence. This is from Botswana. I learned all my African countries, and I've studied so much, it's ridiculous. My brain, sometimes I talk so much, my brain is like popcorn. I mean, you talk and stuff just starts popping out. And I can't help it, I'm sorry, I apologize. All right, next slide. Ooh, that's me when I did radio. WCXJ, And I would take documents into the radio station so I could show people that I wasn't kidding. Yeah, they couldn't see it, but I had it there and it made me feel more confident. I would take the documents into the radio station, autographs by Frederick Douglass and W.E.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, everything. I'd take the autographs in and talk about it, and it was a very successful show. 1 month, we were the most listened to talk show in Pittsburgh. We beat out KDK. It was amazing. Okay, next one. Oh, I started doing exhibits. This is one exhibit I did for gallery, something gallery. It's a gallery they have once a year. And I did it for the August Wilson Cultural Center. But I called it Incredible Grace, One People, Two Continents, 3 Centuries of War. And I had documents going back for all 3 wars from 1776 up to the contemporary period. And this is when I started making money. I had invested a lot of money, of course, in documents, and now I'm charging for my documents to be seen. I had a museum. Yeah. So that was a very good exhibit. I still have that hanging up in my bathroom, although some of the documents are gone. I did auctions. Well, you'll see later. Okay. Oh, I did a good exhibit for the city of Pittsburgh 3 or 4 times. The latter one was this February. I did it for Black History Month. And show them the next slide, hon. They made it John L. Ford Day. Because I've done over 40 exhibits or lectures. And they said John L. Ford Day. So next year, you guys come and see me on February 5th. I'll let you do whatever you want to do. Except money. I won't have any money. Okay, babe. Oh, there has to be some benevolence in whatever you do. What do I mean by that? Remember I said truth. You have to feel good about what you're doing. It's good to make a profit, but feel good about it. The lowest performing high school in the state of Pennsylvania was in Menneson. Do you know where Menneson is? No? It's south of Pittsburgh, maybe 35, 40 miles. And I decided that if I would give them documents and they could tie the documents into their curriculum, wouldn't that be neat? And they could go from the bottom to at least the middle. I gave them $10,000 worth of documents. The one in the middle on the left is a document by Arthur St. Clair, who was the 5th president of the Continental Congress. I don't want to go through all of them, but all actual documents, all in that cabinet, which is in Menneson, and unfortunately, I don't think they ever tied it to their curriculum. But they have it there and the kids can see it. And I wanted to do my own high school. I shouldn't say this, I get so disappointed. But I went there and I couldn't find anybody to talk to, and they said, West Hills High School. You can't do this and you can't do that. You got to go through the board in Oakland and do this. Oh. And then it comes to find out that they graduated 28 people in the class. I said, okay, no, I'm not going to do that. Okay, anyway, that's some of my benevolence. I've given things to churches and everything. Okay, this represents the auctions that I've done. The first auction I did, I had proceeds of, I think, $14,000. I had so many items. And then I did another auction with proceeds of like $7,000 or $8,000. It was smaller. And I think I'll probably do another one unless my kids suggest to me otherwise. I don't know what I'm going to do with my coins, but I'm hoping, I don't know. I won't be here, so I won't, why care? Even if I get money for them, what do I need to spend money on? All I want these days is a hot dog. I don't want anything. I went out last week and I got so mad. I bought this tie. It wasn't last, it was 2 days ago. I told Sonya. I was at Macy's. And I said, oh, here's the white tie. That's what I want to wear. So I found it. You like it? Well, I got it home. I looked at the tie, and it's polyester. I've never bought a polyester tie in my life. It's always been silk. A polyester tie. I thought I was doing good because it was $17. Macy's probably paid $1.98 to make this tie and charged me $17. I still might take it back. Is that our last slide, Sonia?
Yes.
That's the last one?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, let me finish up. Here's what I do. Because I might embark upon another entrepreneurial project in a couple of weeks. But I ask myself these questions. I call it the 5 F words. Good F words. Be fast. If you're working on something, do it diligently, but when you finally get the product, be fast. That's a good one. And be fair. You gotta be fair. Be fair to yourself. I told you, I make this journey around the sun once a year. I'm not gonna change that. So if you're an entrepreneur, you're not gonna change the world. You might not even change your city. You might only be able to change your living room. So be fair to yourself. Another F word is what? Futuristic? Okay, that wasn't one of mine, but that's a good one. Be factual. Challenge yourself. Make certain that you test everything about your product because other people will. Test yourself. And the other is be focused. Be focused on what you want to do. You have to have total focus. So what did I say? Be fast. Fair. Oh, fun. You have to have fun. If you like what you do, it won't even seem like a job. There are times at night, I shouldn't tell you this. I'll get up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and if I have an autograph by Frederick Douglass, I'm happy. I like reading it. Or a document, I want to see if was this written by a ballpoint pen? If so, it's not true. See what I'm saying? I like that investigation. I have a whole packet that I carry around where I can correctly identify documents and so on. Okay. You tired of hearing me talk? Am I done?
You got 10 minutes for questions.
Oh. Do you have any questions? None? Yes, sir.
Can you share some of your story from your journey through orthopedic sales that helped you finance
Okay.
some of your entrepreneurship?
Okay. I was in banking for 11 years, decided I could make more money in sales. So I went to Park Davis, then I went to 3M Corporation. I did make a lot more money. But I'm going to tell you the main thing that influenced me about entrepreneurship, and you'll laugh at this, maybe not laugh, but I traveled from Maryland, and I went to a place called Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. Do you know where that's at? Straight north, 200 miles. And I was conducting a conversion to put their old manual system onto an automated system. And at that time, Mellon Bank had computers on the third floor that had rules this big, and they were 6 feet tall. So, I was in charge of that conversion. So I went to the bank, and before I would go to any bank, I would stop and get some breakfast, read the newspaper, and I'd know everything about that bank that I needed to know before I got there. I was happy. So I go to the bank, we're getting ready to have a meeting, and I said, okay, let's get together, folks. We need to start this before so-and-so and so. They wouldn't stop talking. So I tried it again. 5 minutes later, I said, okay, let's try to wrap it up so that we can get started. They still wouldn't stop talking. Now, here's a black man in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. They'd never seen a black guy before, number one. Here's what happened. The owner of the bank started coming up the stairs. We were on the third floor. I'll never forget it. The owner of the bank started coming up the stairs. Everybody got quiet. So he said to me, Mr. Ford, where do we stand? I said, well, they've been very busy, and we haven't been able to get to the bulk of what we need to talk about. He said, everybody, listen up. Mr. Ford's going to talk to you for 10 minutes. I want it done before you go to lunch. This, and this. That's the first time I had seen power. He had power. Guess why he had power? He owned the bank. He owned the grocery store. He owned the new car lot. He owned the used car lot. He had property all over town. First time I really was able to see power. And I forget his name, but that was in Ridgeway, Pennsylvania. And I've seen things like in Moundsville, West Virginia, and I traveled all over different places. Well, I hope you enjoyed. Any more questions? None. I feel unwanted. Yes, ma'am.
If she can organize a lecture by you, a little bit about history of your exhibits. We have a course, Center for African,
Oh, yes.
you know?
Mhm,
Yeah.
I know.
And they have, it's very nice professor who is running that history department.
Okay.
Yes.
And we would like that part about history.
Okay. Do you want to talk to my daughter about it?
People organize.
She tries to boss me around now. But she'll let you know whether I can do it or not. Yeah,
Yes.
but she better not delete me on Facebook, 'cause I'll follow her.
Very big audience, you know, and
Yeah.
you know, the couple from the University of Pittsburgh and CMU come together,
Right.
history department, African.
I'd like to do that.
Right.
I would love to.
Okay. Sonia? Okay. Yes, ma'am. My friend. Yes. That are struggling?
Yeah, make it a career.
Gain knowledge first of your entire product. Gain knowledge. There are always ways to make money. Now, if you need a certain amount of cash up front, you could do what I did with coins, or you would be surprised as to what you could do if you manage your budget. Number two, if you can get a line of credit from a bank, that is absolutely fabulous. In other words, let them open up a credit line for $5,000 or whatever else you need. But figure out a way that you can get that money back in a reliable fashion so that you're not shorting yourself. I couldn't do hardly any of that because I married when I was 19, and I had two beautiful children, that one and that one, and I had to keep food on the table. And they weren't giving out loans to blacks in 1969 easily. So I had to do it the hard way. It took me, before I made any money on my entrepreneurship activities, well, I made some with speakers, and I made some with dogs. Oh, I didn't tell you that, did I? I raised boxers, then I went to English Mastiff, big dogs. And I had a female with a very highly regarded pedigree that nobody knew about, from England. I mated her with a champion out of Greene County named Trooper. We had 7 puppies. I sold each of the puppies for like $1,000 average. But on several of the puppies that had a very, very promising future, I would put a clause in the contract that stated that if they ever mated, my pup, which would then be a grown dog, that I would get X number of dollars as a consequence of my mating skills. So one dog who became an international champion, I made another $4,000 off of him, something like that. There are different things that you can do. And let me tell you about this, talking about prejudice. When I was selling my puppies, I sold my puppies, one at a time. So a lady from Philadelphia, one of my pups, we talked on the phone, we talked on her way here. She finally called me when she reached Allegheny General Hospital. I'm at the hospital and so on and so on. I said, okay, I'll be waiting for you. All the pups are in the front yard. She came up. We have a dead-end street, so you have to turn around to go back out. She came down the street. She saw me and the pups. She rolled her window up. I'm not buying no Negro Mastiffs. She would not buy a pup from me because I was black. Isn't that something? So it's hard to understand why some of those things happen. But that happened. I had another lady from Philadelphia that came the next week and bought Abel. All of my pups had biblical names, and I called him Abel. Do you remember him? Mm-hmm. He was the biggest one. She bought him, and he's the one that became 3 times international champion. So it worked out to be pretty good. I thank you all very much. I'm so sorry that I wasn't more energetic for you, but when you travel the sun 73 times, it takes a little bit out of you. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry I was late because life comes in on you while we're driving.
Yes.
But your class has been one of the most fantastic and amazing classes that I have been to, and with
Thank you.
Brother John, teaching us all of these intricate parts that we will not find on Facebook or Google, and no longer do we look in the Britannica, especially we have to go back to
Thank you.
7 to see the written word, and now they have the written word only 2 lines now. So it's important if you're going
Thank
to
you.
study, go back to our libraries like we have right here.
Thank you.
Go back to Britannica in 1940s on up, and you'll still get the true history.
Okay.
They had to shorten it. But
Thank you.
Thank you for unshortening it and giving us our knowledge today.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And the last thing I was talking about the dogs. I kept 2 of the puppies, of the English Mastiff puppies. And the reason I did, 2 reasons. Well, the main reason I did is because I wanted to do my own experiments on learned behavior versus genetic behavior. So I took the most aggressive pup, a pup named Eve, a female, Sonia is her, and a pup by the name of Cain, a male, who was the most docile. And I wanted to see if I could make, indeed, that change. And it happens. You can change genetic behavior into learned behavior, but sometimes you have to watch out. Because if that person or animal gets into crisis, they might resort back to their genetic behavior, depending on how intact your learned behavior is. Long story. Do your own experiments. Hey, I bred fish. I wanted to see if mollies could look like swordtails. I like doing my own experiments. Then I know what's happening. Thank you all very much. Really appreciate it. And we'll one day see you soon. Thank you.